DCX Sonic 1. It starts by getting straight to the point at least. That's not like Flynn. Sonic's picnic with Tails and even Amy gets interrupted by a ridiculous looking bad guy or machine that better be here for a good reason. I don't know much about DC, just pop culture osmosis and Linkara. So hopefully my outsider's perspective on this will be interesting. The machine sends an armored bad guy out of it that immediately tries to attack the heroes for no apparent reason. This looks like a very lazily written excuse plot so far, but I guess it'll tell us why. Fast pacing is good, the real problem is that I couldn't give less of a shit about this bad guy with no knowledge about him. It might as well be a robot with more hit points than a badnik for the way the plot is. And the heroes are fighting exactly as they usually do. Combine that with there being no character here without plot armor, and there's no reason to care about anything that's going on. But it's nice of Amy to thank Sonic. Out of nowhere, Sonic says they should get away from these things for now and runs away with his friends. So they figured out they were invincible. There wasn't enough fighting for me to have any chance of learning that. It looks like they gave up too early to be in character. Boss fights take 8 hits after all, but whatever ends the story faster. Tails somehow thinks it stands to reason to just jump to the conclusion that there's other portals elsewhere for no reason. Yeah, that bodes well. Sonic smirks in spite of having to run from a battle, something he never has to do. That prevents him from being relatable entirely. It was instantly predictable that Knuckles was gonna lose the fight. It's just a bunch of boring padding until the Master Emerald gets shattered by a laser, because the bad guys don't want it to neutralize the Chaos Emeralds. Which apparently they found out about from another universe that never interacted with theirs. Whatever keeps the plot moving. I hate that they have a location that's an IDW Sonic. It makes me worry that it's gonna act like it's canon to IDW Sonic. That makes me worry they're gonna put IDW on hold until this crossover's over. I had to look up the wiki of this issue, where I learned that most of the time something crosses over with DC, it's not canon to either property. Eventually Sonic meets the Flash, without it being explained how he knows to be here. And somehow Flash mistakes him for someone else I've never heard of with a stupidly spelled name that I'm willing to bet doesn't look like Sonic, because that'd be violating copyright law. Way to introduce Flash. Make him look stupid. And they interact just like you'd expect other than that. To put myself in the shoes of someone who's never seen Sonic before, what reason would they have to care about the Sonic characters based on this issue? They look at it and think Sonic's just like the Flash. And Amy and Tails have no personality, they're just nice people. I don't know why a crossover with DC or Marvel wasn't done way before the Exiles of all things. Sonic was a household name in the 90s. Why did DC even consider this now? More importantly, why didn't they get a DC writer to write this? I would think a DC writer would be a lot more popular, because IDW and RG are more obscure comic book publishers. The story's got some padding for a while other than Flash running through a loop for once. Then it sees Silver in front of some bad guys. Oh, you fucked up. Silver has no business being in a story about tackling a really dangerous threat, because I'm gonna be wondering why he doesn't instantly take it out the whole story. Since it can levitate small objects and bend bars, there's no reason he would just leave his telekinesis at trapping things in force fields. He could take stuff off of stuff, so he'd instantly beat the bad guy as soon as he'd see him if he wasn't given the warp effect just to keep going. Name one time in the games he'd be grunting while holding some robots with telekinesis and going, "There's too many to manage at once!" He doesn't have anything to worry about. At least he only has to throw them at the ground to kill them. The problem is, even if the writer just makes him stick to fighting mooks, anyone with a brain will start wondering why he won't go after the real threats if he or someone near him knows about them. The story will do nothing to establish that he can't do anything but make things float. So anyone who's not a Sonic fan is definitely going to be confused. And it's stupid that there's no name tag text box over the superhero. That'll be stupid anytime that mistake happens. It's harder to be invested if you don't know the name of a character. It's nice of him to say Silver has impressive talent, but he doesn't have to call him a kid. That's condescending. He says if he can group them, he'll take them out. And Silver eagerly says sure to this guy he just met, instead of pointing out he can take them out effortlessly. He won't refuse his help either, though. But telekinesis is more useful than his power. Like, you never have to reach to get the TV remote ever again. And he's quite proud of his telekinesis in the games, so why would he immediately admire him? You can tell this is written by an IDW writer. But in a vacuum, there's nothing wrong with the concept of someone being nice and cheerful, so this is just a nitpick at worst. Somehow he asks him if he's a psychic too. It never made sense that Silver ever thought of himself as having psychic powers, because he can't see the future or see auras. So he uses his mind. By the same logic, every Sonic character has psychic powers. It's respectable that this guy casually tells Silver about the source of his power and asks him what he is in the middle of a dangerous situation. And it makes sense since these mooks are powerless to them. So he has every reason to assume that nobody's going to get hurt as long as they're around. So it's not really insensitive of him, I guess. Somehow they say they should clear the skies so they can focus on ground level when people are getting chased on the ground level, when instead they should be immediately going to ground level to protect these people. The story doesn't show me why the civilian's just sitting there waiting to be hit. I'm not shown her surroundings. The mook gets attacked by Shadow and Batman, and I'm glad they don't talk to each other because it's faster pacing that way. What a nice coincidence that it just happened to be Batman helping Shadow. I wonder why they even used Shadow, when the writers hate having to write him based on Sega's notes, and the fans made it clear they hate how he's written in IDW. Published by DC, but it's in the IDW section of Grabber Zone, so that's confusing. Amy says this depressing city damaging is awful, and since she's the first to acknowledge it, I kind of appreciate someone showing that compassion finally. Of course, she and Tails go fight a robot, and they get some laser assistance from Cyborg. I remember seeing a little of Teen Titans as a kid, so he's nice to see. I guess he was a lot more popular than the other Teen Titans, because he's here and not all the other ones. It's a little charming what he says. It's nice of Wonder Woman to say nice effort, but it should be obvious she doesn't need to ask them for help, since they were already helping. Then they get approached by some generic, boring bad guy I don't care about, and somehow he gets nervous like he knows something bad's gonna happen to him for no reason. And yet he doesn't avoid Knuckles attacking him. It's a little nice, but why doesn't it show me the impact of it? It's a shame Knuckles held back with his super strength when he spent his whole life guarding the Master Emerald all alone. And I have to assume the Master Emerald itself communicated with him like a person a lot, since otherwise he'd have gone insane from loneliness by the time he met Sonic. Then Superman lands on the bad guy. That's all he does, which looks lame. And why does he have his arms crossed like Moody Shadow? I hope his personality's intact. I've read the first volume of Golden Age Superman, so he's my favorite, and the one I know the best. He was surprisingly law-breaking in that one. He was more of a loose cannon than you'd expect in that. Eventually, Knuckles of course complains that he wasn't done the fight yet. And confusingly, they both know each other's names already. At first I thought he only guessed his name. What's the point of having them know each other's names already? I have to assume they met off screen. Every time something like this happens, it takes me out of the story. But it's forgivable when the stuff I'm forced to assume is clearly really the case, and I'd rather the pacing be faster than the alternative. I feel like only executive meddling would have the pacing be as fast as it is, because usually his writing has way slower pacing. But at least in the Exiles crossover, it didn't wreck the immersion by having a Sonic character already know a superhero when we saw him talk to him the first time. Superman suddenly has an expression that is in character, and politely says sorry and thanks him for softening him up for him. Which is especially polite because he didn't need his help at all. It's hardly respectful of Knuckles to have his work be pointless. Why even have him in the story? Why team these two up? The pacing stopped for the characters to recap to each other. Knuckles says his island fell into the ocean, and he would have gone with it if it weren't for Superman. And logically, this would only mean that he would have let himself drown for failing, because Knuckles can glide and swim. He could have saved himself. Why does Flynn keep thinking the island would instantly sink into the ocean after falling when it never did that in the games or Archie? If that happened, Sonic Adventure kind of happens because Sonic wouldn't have been able to get emeralds from it. And there's nothing good about the island going underwater if it falls. At least not yet. It's nice of Superman to say sorry couldn't do more for him. It is charming that Flash and Sonic were keeping count of how many parademons they took out. But if the parademons are the things that Sonic retreated from, how was Sonic able to take them out when he thought he couldn't beat them earlier? So he really did give up too early. And also, if they're parademons instead of robots, then they're animals under armor. So if this was the same Sonic as an IDW, he'd be hypocritical for killing them. What else could parademons be made of? Flash is the second best character here. I just don't find Flash very impressive right now because he's the same as Sonic. Sonic looks too cocky, like he's taking the situation not seriously enough. Like he doesn't care enough about the civilians in danger. He's just smiling the whole time. So it looks like he doesn't have any depth, so I don't really care about him. The superheroes start doing a boring exposition dump. Them introducing themselves is mostly worthless because even the audience is gonna know who most of these people are from pop culture osmosis at least. The only one that needed naming is Jon Stewart. Not exactly a memorable name. And even then it was obvious that he was a Green Lantern. What about Cyborg would enable them to reach another world? That's not sufficient exposition. Good thing it's explained later. Because I wouldn't expect he's a cyborg to just instantly make it make sense that he can travel to another universe. Because Bunny doesn't. Then Sonic introduces himself, insists that what he called Sonic Heroes aren't organized, and says they just take life as it comes and help anyone. Why does he think that doesn't apply to these guys? That's elitist. And it's so weird of Sonic to refer to Amy as his bestie, and not call Tails his best friend. He did the bare minimum he's supposed to aside from that. Bestie sounds like something a girl would say, not Sonic. And Amy and him have completely different dynamics than this in the games. At least in the older games. Even in the newer ones she's sassy to him though, so still a different dynamic. Amy still has the same past where she didn't respect his boundaries. So why does she deserve to be called his bestie? This is writer favoritism. Sonic flatters Knuckles as tough, but doesn't compliment the rest of them. You'd think he'd compliment Silver, but not Knuckles and Shadow. Knuckles is his rival. So why would he compliment Knuckles and not Silver? He just says Shadow says he's the ultimate life form. Jerk. It was nice of Silver to say it's a pleasure to work with them. Knuckles is as bored as I am and asks who the bad guys are. I don't care. They've got a generic goal. They've got as little personality as the superheroes do. I don't need to know anything else about them. They're just there to make the plot. You could just replace them with an evil-looking eye that's a robot, and all his goal is to steal the Master Emeralds and stuff. Knuckles really shouldn't care what they are either. It's not like when he first met Sonic, he insisted on getting to know who he was before using traps on him. He has no reason to think that Darkseid is actually a good guy. So there's no reason he would insist on getting to know him just in case he's actually wrong about him being a bad guy, if that's the logic. After extremely boring exposition that only reminds me that superhero comics are too bleak for me to want to care about them. Because what's the point of writing it that Darkseid's conquered entire worlds beyond shock value? He's worse than Sadie and Robotnik. I think action series need a lot more to them than just, they fight supervillains. What's the point of caring if there's always going to be a supervillain right around the corner? And the villains are always going to come back after getting defeated. It's just bleak. BoomTube is such a lame term. There's a bunch of boring stating the obvious. That he should have just kept off screen while he was at it and skipped past it with a time skip. Because we would have assumed they'd say this to each other. And he didn't think Superman saving Knuckles was important to show. Superman says they should make a plan. And Shadow says he doesn't have time for this without a thought bubble explaining they could use chaos control to single-handedly beat the bad guys after he finds them from running around the planet enough. And he could also just warp. He could use his teleportation to beat the bad guy. Just warp to the ocean while holding him, then warp away from the ocean. Done. It's nice of Superman to say he'd value everyone's input. Shadow walks away, and Batman of all people says he'll handle him when he's not exactly the loving social butterfly type. If anything, you'd think it'd be Superman. Out of nowhere, he asks him who is the one Shadow saw die in front of him. Shadow lampshades how he would ever know that. Yeah, he literally had no reason to think that and was far more likely to be wrong. He was projecting his own problem onto him because it reminded him of himself. He barely heard Shadow say anything. All he got out of him was that he's a serious person. That doesn't necessarily mean trauma did it. And he's the same general color scheme as him, except with red. It's acting like Batman's psychic because he's just that awesome, as in Creator's Pet, when really he's just being silly. After they give each other exposition about themselves, which is boring as they don't react to learning about each other, the story goes back to the heroes giving boring exposition to each other. How has Tails only just now started developing an emerald tracking system? He should have made it way earlier. Like, you'd expect that to be the case in Sonic 3. Because how did Sonic know to go to Angel Island if his plane wasn't directly following behind the Eggmobile 2 feet away from it? I guess the interaction between Cyborg and Tails is what everyone expected. So obviously it's good that he likes his technology. Anyways, more boring blathering. I wish it just skipped to them fighting the bad guys again instead. What's to defend here? Executives should have stepped in here. Knuckles lampshades that Superman's backstory is too cruel. Superman says the likable dialogue I'd expect of him. Anyways, it really should be explained at this point why Amy's car can fly. Because it was never explained in the games either. And she never has a flying car in the main games. Just the spin-off games that are never confirmed to be actually canon. And why is Shadow riding that motorcycle when he's faster than it, and he doesn't tire out from running? So it's not like he'd think he should conserve his energy. He's arrogant, so he wouldn't think he'd need to. He said he didn't have time for this, but he has time to be slow instead of running while holding Batman? He could be holding his wrist and run with him. Because it didn't hurt Elise. Then the story demeans Tails in favor of the other franchise because Cyborg can upgrade his system 100-fold. Are you forgetting that the Sonic universe is more futuristic than ours? It's got sentient robots like Orbot and Cubot in it. At least he says Tails is skilled. There's a waste of a panel I already said what was wrong with earlier. Silver literally says that John's power is better than mind over matter. I was being cynical earlier, but he actually confirms it. This is bullshit. Why isn't Silver like he is in Colors DS? The Silver there would never think anyone's powers were better than his own. It doesn't explain exactly how far it goes that it can create anything. Anything creates is still green. So it doesn't really prove that. Like, would he be able to create a functioning Game Boy? Would the screen just be green the whole time? If he could literally create anything, then he'd be able to create Chaos Emeralds. So we could just create a whole bunch of them, and then Sonic would go super and end the crossover already. So he can't literally create anything. Flash is surprised that Sonic didn't get his speed from a mad scientist treadmill accident. Fleetway Sonic did. And he's from a comic book market not dominated by superheroes. The so-called Sonic fan writing this doesn't have Sonic say that maybe an alternate universe version of him got his speed from that. In the Psych of America Bible, he did get his speed from that because that actually makes more sense than him being fast for no reason, which is the same thing as the X-Men being born with magic for no reason. Because otherwise, everyone here would be running as fast as Sonic because they want to. So they go to South Island, and Sonic gets called the nickname Rouge gave him. And while they skid to a stop for no reason, they see a bad guy with an emerald who by an unlikely coincidence says exactly what we first heard Shadow say in SA2, to brainwash people into thinking the story's good. Knee-jerk emotional reactions don't make me get amnesia of my experience of a story as a whole. Seriously though, if they kept running, they'd ram into Darkseid to send him flying into the ocean, and the emerald would fall to the grass because he's not even touching it. So the next scene's gonna be dog shit writing that makes both of them impossibly stupid to force Darkseid to get away with the emerald to increase attention unnecessarily, since he could just get another emerald and lose this one. Since when does an emerald that you just found on the ground hover over someone's hand for no reason? They only hover in the special stages, or when you're using them to go super. It's inaccurate to the games for a crossover meant to represent the Sonic brand. And there's nothing good about this anyways. It's good that it acknowledges I was right that Sonic's team in the games does have an official team name, and is an official group, by calling them Sonic Heroes, not even just Team Sonic. It calls them what he called them for actual legitimacy. It completely disregards that he said they weren't as organized as the Justice League. Good, because most Sonic fans wouldn't mind that. I'm so glad this issue is over. It was so boring. That's my main complaint about it, is that it's boring. Since the ending of it is expecting me to believe that someone has any chance of leaving with an emerald when faced with two extremely fast people, it would have been a much worse story if it had room for the ensuing fight that's somehow gonna take more than Sonic and Flash to beat. But if Sonic had just kept going and rammed into Darkseid, the whole crossover should have already been over. So the trademark Flynn writing and making characters impossibly stupid, shitting all over them, is going to be all over this crossover, making anyone who calls it peak look like an idiot. This issue by Ian Flynn was about Darkseid sending bad guys to a bunch of inhabited places without an emerald for no reason, so that Sonic and his friends have to fight them, and then talk to superheroes for 1 billion years. So I really wish it never existed, but it wasn't as bad as I expected, because the pacing was so fast that it was breaking the immersion until the fighting stopped. Then the pacing was boring dog shit where the heroes were giving each other exposition instead of progressing the plot, that we could have just assumed they gave each other after a time skip. None of the heroes beyond Batman seemed to have any personality trait beyond nice guy, with the exception of Cyborg, who's nice technology fan. And even then, Batman's still a good person, so he's technically still a good guy. So the characterization was mediocre. One-dimensional as shit as far as I'm concerned. It did what everyone would expect a writer to do when it comes to Sonic characters finding certain superheroes relatable. So that's not impressive. There wasn't any real creativity here. Any fanfiction writer could come up with the Sonic characters meet the DC heroes and fight Superman's version of Eggman. At least the plot doesn't seem like it was forced to happen in universe-wise. I can't find any major plot holes. Like, I can assume that the reason Darkseid sent his mooks to places where there wasn't an emerald is that he wanted to conquer it, or he didn't know exactly where the emerald was right away. So the writing isn't contrived, so it's got that over all of the other crossovers. But the least bad is still bad. Its tone was depressing, making me instantly impatient for the crossover to end. It's underwhelming in nearly every major writing component. Creativity, characterization, world building, logic, pacing, tone. Most of the dialogue was fine, that's all that's good. I don't see how it would be just an opinion that the issue is bad then when it fails at most of the major components of good writing. And almost nothing actually happened in this issue, when the first issue is supposed to wow people. People in general, not just easily impressed stands who will like anything Flynn writes. The average person is gonna see this generic plot where, of course, the bad guys go after the Chaos Emeralds, and be able to predict how the rest of the crossover is gonna go. Let me guess. They're gonna be fighting for the rest of the Chaos Emeralds.